Why did Netflix cast a hottie to play Ed Gein?
Why have you made Ed Gein hot? There was no need.
Because what do you mean? I just wanted to give him a big ol' hug. I know it also doesn't help that Charlie Hunnam played him because god
Oh, he's kind of cute. He's a murderer!
Recently I've watched the new season of Monsters, with this season being based around the Ed Gein case, and it has left me with many questions. With one of them being, why are so many people attracted to the character? Admitting that, well, he's kind of hot. But why would a convicted killer create a fan base and be presented in this type of way? Ryan Murphy, who you may know from shows like American Horror Story, Scream Queens, created a series called Monster, telling the stories of famous killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, the Mendez brothers, and now Ed Gein. The show has not been shy of controversy and has been accused of many things like sexualizing or glamorizing these killers, creating false narratives, and more often than not, making the audience feel bad or even rooting for the killer. The show is full of incredible actors who also happen to be Hollywood heartthrobs. And when playing a character who has done some truly terrible things and should in no way be sexualized, so why is it coming across like we're maybe unintentionally creating fan clubs for them? Disclaimer before this video begins, we are going to be talking about some very dark topics. Overall, I've tried my very hardest not to go too into some of these dark details, as I don't want to trigger anyone. For some people who commit heinous crimes have not just conjured themselves up a death sentence, but also conjuring up themselves a die-hard fan base, with the majority of these people being women.
Why were you in the courtroom today?
I just wanted to see what he looked like. I think he's cute.
In several cases like Ted Bundy, Charles Manson have even married and had children behind bars, like magazine editor Doreen Liu, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, who fell in love with Richard Ramirez, better known as the Night Stalker, who was responsible for many murders and sexual assaults in 1985. He had many fans, but after seeing his mugshot on TV, Doreen became interested in Ramirez and started writing letters. The former editor became completely devoted to him and said, "I believe in his innocence. To this day, his innocence or his guilt has never played a part in our relationship."
And yet you look at him and you see the man of your dreams. I can't help the way the world looks at him. They don't know him the way I do.
After years of exchanging letters and visiting the prison, the couple married in 1996, but multiple sources say that she became more and more unsure in her faith in him when new evidence came to light. There have been many more stories of women in particular falling in love with men in prison, of what some people call superfans, getting into relationships and writing letters with some people as young as 16 years old, with the intention of getting in touch with these people, these murderer people, these actual serial killers. The other word used for this type of obsession with these people is hybristophilia, also known as Bonnie and Clyde syndrome. It describes a sexual interest in and attraction to those who have committed crimes. In some cases, this may be directed towards people in prison for various types of criminal activities, and there are many reasons of what can cause this. Could be a history of childhood trauma and physical or sexual abuse. Therefore, marrying someone behind bars is a way for them to gain that control they crave. Another reason is if you form a relationship with a convicted criminal or notorious serial killer, you gain attention from the media, which can lead to things like book deals or movie deals. So there is a way to gain status which in perhaps something you were denied in your childhood. But not everyone who has a fascination or interest in serial killers has hybristophilia. So why are women in particular so obsessed with this like serial killer thing? And Monster is definitely not helping this situation. I will be talking about the Ed Gein and Monster series later on in this video, so bear with me. Like we talked about earlier, serial killers would often have some sort of fan club.
But now in a bizarre twist, many are begging for his attention and his affection. The death row Romeo.
When you hear about women fighting each other physically or getting in some type of altercation over a visit with someone who's sitting in jail and is totally oblivious and is not even aware it's going on.
Small army of women continues to flock to the killer.
In cases like Ted Bundy, would show up to the courtroom with their hair parted in the middle and wearing hoop earrings, on the assumption that this was the style worn by his victims. Some even dyed their hair brown to match the hair of those he murdered. As I mentioned earlier, he would go on to marry one of these admirers in prison. Before social media, these fans were popular, but nowhere on the scale that they are today. Online groups are created, giving safe spaces for those people to talk and discuss. Now, most of the ones I've read have been people actually discussing these crimes and debating over what drove these killers to do what they did, and not necessarily like fangirling over them, which I think is okay if you're just talking about the crime. I don't think that's, pretty normal. Most people are very interested in talking about these things. But it's when you get deeper into this kind of culture, when you find things like When you find things like memes mocking murder victims or posts gleefully admitting their attraction to these people, that is definitely going a bit too far. But this is where the lines begin to get crossed, and the act of casting a very, very attractive actor definitely sends mixed signals towards people. I just wanted to add that it's not about the casting of the actor, but the way in which the character is portrayed. Like Charlize Theron, and the reason her role in the movie Monster works so well is the overall complete physical and emotional transformation, which is truly frightening. And I'm not saying that Ryan Murphy doesn't do this with his series, because he does, and this could just be that, female serial killer and they don't get as glorified as male serial killers. I think there is a way that Ryan Murphy writes his shows where it does feel a little bit more sexual, which every creator writes things differently. And I do believe that no matter what he does, who he casts, there will always be people fangirling. Everyone is attracted to people differently, so, no matter who he casts is going to be attractive to some people. So, and I'm not saying the people he casts are like bad actors, because Charlize is also a very attractive woman, but the way in which she plays the character is completely not her. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I just wanted to add that in there. Along with the Monster series, we have seen many Hollywood heartthrobs play these awful characters. First one I can really think of is Zac Efron, who played Ted Bundy in the film Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, followed by Ross Lynch, who played Jeffrey Dahmer in My Friend Dahmer. But what is the difference between these characters versus characters like Cillian Murphy as Jackson Ripper, Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman, and these other fictional characters? They are fictional. With actual killers, whether that be an edit of a TV show with an actor playing them, there will still be families and victims, loved ones out there. And I know many of these edits are saying editing the actor. To many, if it's clips of the actor as the character, you're technically just editing the character. If you're wanting to edit the actor, just go find clips of the actor. If I wanted to edit Charlie Hunnam, I would just go and find a scene pack of Charlie Hunnam, not edit him as Ed Gein in the series. There's a really good Calvin Klein ad of him. If anyone makes an edit of him in that ad, please tag me in that. I want to see that. What I don't want to see is edits of Ed Gein, okay? Are actors making killers more palatable? Because many of these shows are trying to humanize these characters, who in some cases have done awful things. Going along with that, are people just dismissing the horrific acts they did and painting their victims in some cases in a completely different light than the truth? So let's briefly talk about the show. I know it's probably what we've been waiting for, and that's why you clicked on this video, but we're actually getting into it now. As I briefly talked about earlier, Monsters is a Netflix series created by Ryan Murphy in order to tell stories of, killers and explore the psychological and social factors that created them, rather than just the acts they commit. Season 1 followed the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, played by Evan Peters, the story of the serial killer who murdered 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991. The series was followed with users who expressed some sorrow or sympathy for Dahmer, very kind of similar to what happened to him in real life, which is crazy to think about. Ryan Murphy also came out and said, "We weren't so much interested in Jeffrey Dahmer, the person, but what made him the monster that he became." Some of the victim's family and friends, like Eric Perry, the cousin of Dahmer's victim, Errol Lindsay, said that they only found out about the series when it was released and were not contacted beforehand. Netflix wasn't required to talk to the victims' families because the events portrayed are public record, but they have said that the show has been very traumatic towards them. Perry's cousin and Lindsay's sister wrote separately that the show felt harsh and careless. The mother of aspiring model Tony, who was deaf and just 21 when Dahmer murdered him in 1991, told The Guardian that the events of the show just didn't happen like that. "I don't see how they can do that," said Shirley. "I don't see how they can use our names and put stuff out there like that." Murphy said they tried to reach out to the victims' families, but not a single person responded. However, the show got into a lot more hot water when season 2 came out, which followed the story of the Mendez brothers, played by Cooper Koch as Eric Mendez and Nicholas Chavs as Lioy Mendez, the story of the two brothers who murdered their parents in 1989. The reason this season stirred up a lot of debate and conversation is due to a few things. First of all, the two brothers are still alive. The series also shows the events surrounding the murders, including the brothers' claims of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, in addition to showing many points of view, including the parents. Eric Mendez actually made a statement on X through his wife, criticizing the series. "I believed we had moved beyond the lies and ruinous character portrayals of Lyle. Creating a caricature of Lyle rooted in horrible and blatant lies rampant in the show. I can only believe they were done so on purpose. It is with a heavy heart that I can say, I believe Ryan Murphy cannot be this naive and inaccurate. about the facts of our lives, so as to do this without bad intent. It is sad for me to know that Netflix's dishonest portrayal of the tragedies surrounding our crime have taken the painful truths several steps backward, back through time to an era where the prosecution built a narrative on a belief system that males were not sexually abused, and that males experienced trauma differently than women. Those awful lives have been disrupted and exposed by countless brave victims over the last 2 decades who have broken through their personal shame and bravely spoken out. So now Murphy shapes his horrible narrative through vile, appalling character portrayals of Lau and me, and dishearteningly slander. Is the truth not enough? Let the truth stand as the truth. How demoralizing to know that one man with power can undermine decades of progress in shedding light on childhood trauma. Violence is never an answer, never a solution, and is always tragic. As such, I hope it's never forgotten that violence against a child creates 100 horrendous and silent crime scenes darkly shadowed behind glitter and glamour, and rarely exposed until tragedy penetrates everyone involved. To all those who have reached out and supported me, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Ryan responded to this statement and said, I think it's a lot of foul outrage. I think that the show is the best thing that has ever happened to the Mendes brothers in 30 years in prison. They have said as much. They've told lawyers as much. I think it's very difficult to have your lives splashed all over the world, but I think that the show is doing a wonderful job of having people talk about their case, talk about their innocence or their guilt, whether they should have another trial should they be freed.
You know, Eric Menendez has spoken out about the show. I think that's interesting because I know he hasn't watched the show. Find that curious. I know this for a fact. I hope he does watch it. I think if he did watch it, he would be incredibly proud of Cooper Koch, who plays him. My feeling about this is it's a 30-year-old case. I think the show is a very interesting, what we're trying to do is a Rashomon approach, where we show many perspectives. That's what the show does. In every episode, you are given a new theory based on people who were either involved or covered the case. So some of the controversy of the show seems to be people thinking, for example, that the brothers are having an incestuous relationship. There are people who say that never happened. There were people who said it did happen. The show is a whodunit like that. We know how it ended. We know 2 people were brutally shot. And so I think people are a little confused about what we were trying to do. Our view and what we wanted to do was present you all the facts, and at the end of it, have you do 2 things. Make up your own mind about who's innocent, who's guilty, and who's the monster. And also have a conversation about something that's never talked about in our culture, which is male sexual abuse, which we do responsibly. You know, I write about provocative things and controversial things, and my motto is never complain and never explain. Wow. That's what I think.
The show did, in fact, create a lot more eyes and discussion over this case, but I can't help but think that they possibly could have gone in a better way of doing it. I just wanted to add here that with the Mendes brothers case, I definitely agree that there was a lot more going on than 2 boys who just killed their parents, and I don't want to brush past details of abuse that they both faced from their parents. I highly suggest you watch the documentary made by the family to really gather your own thoughts on the case. Which leads us on to the latest season, which follows the story of Ed Gein, played by Charlie Hunnam, of the American murderer and body snatcher who did some really awful stuff, like really disgusting stuff. Like really gross stuff. Since watching the series, I've watched a few documentaries and gathered some more knowledge on the actual case. And you can definitely see what parts they made up to make ends meet, which they have throughout the show. Which kind of makes sense because they need like a A to B, but you know, this is a real story at the end of the day. I don't know how you can like kind of make up parts if you're telling a real story. Do you know what I mean? The show does present Gein in a way that has been described as a gentle monster, and showing him with a chainsaw and shirtless that can be described as being a bit over-sexualized. I haven't gone into too much depth on the previous cases, as there are really good long breakdowns out there, so if you want to know more about any of these cases, I highly recommend you know, going and watching some of these very deep dives and documentaries. But I will be going into this one a little bit more, not too much, but viewers' discretion is advised. Ed Gein was known for creating things out of human flesh, like face masks, bins, you know, etc. He was also inspiration for the stories of Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but many of those things in those stories didn't actually happen. For example, he was never actually known to have used a chainsaw, so having images in the promotion with him holding a chainsaw has rubbed some people the wrong way. The show also does dive into Psycho and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and people who took inspiration of his case, which in a way I found really interesting because isn't this show the same thing, right? The show has also been picked apart for its inaccuracies throughout the seasons and making bits and bobs up to kind of give the story more depth. And circling back to the main topic of this video, my algorithm has been full of Charlie Hunnam as Ed Gein edits, and I don't know why. Like, I generally don't watch them, I promise. I feel like I need to put a light on because it's so dark right now. Give me a second. I have a feeling this looks even worse, but we're just going to deal with it. Here's my thoughts on the show and this overall topic of this video. The show visually and story-wise does keep your attention. You know, I wasn't bored, I was very hooked the whole show. I think the acting in this season and previous seasons has been incredible, and I loved seeing Addison Rae in this season. I think she did a great job. Say what you want about Addison Rae, but I love Addison Rae so much. The pros about the show, it does bring more eyes and people to these cases and does show this story or situation to a new audience. However, with that said, these are real stories. These are real people involved. These are real killers, real families, real victims. And changing the narrative to make it flow better, because these are real people and the majority of the story is actual events, when you have these little nuggets of like made up or not accurate, presenting the whole thing as a retelling, these little details, in some cases they're not that small, does seriously impact the story and can present the victims in different ways, which has a massive impact on these families and these victims of the truth. The show has also just announced the 4th season, and it's the first time we're going to see a female killer, female murderer, with Ella Betty, I think that's how you pronounce it, as Lizzie Borden, who is accused of the 1892 murder of her parents. The announcement has already been filled with people asking why they have yassified her. I hope this video wasn't too hard to follow, and I hope it wasn't too deep. I tried to keep it as light as possible without missing anything. It was a bit deeper and darker than my previous videos, and in all honesty, I think there is a way that these stories can be told that is respectful and doesn't sexualize these people. And I always say, if you're watching a dramatized movie or show on a case, you should probably watch a documentary and find information about it by yourself and just not relying on it as like your source truth, if you know what I mean. Anyway, question in the comments today is, have you watched the series and what is your thoughts on the topics of this video? I'm very sorry for the lighting of this video, and I hope you have a great day. This is probably going to be the most darkest video I'm ever going to make on my channel because I am frankly very scared of everything. I have to like sleep on my back because I have to look at everything. I don't want anything to move. I'm very scared. We need to make this a very light ending. I know what I can do. I crocheted this. It's over the garden wall. And I crocheted a pumpkin. And I also crocheted a frog. I'll show you that and then I'll end the video. Okay, so here is my frog. Oh my god. I got to one eye and then I gave up because it didn't look like a frog. If you have any ideas on what I can turn this into, please comment them below. I don't want to get rid of him because he took a long time. He took, you know, half a day to make. And I kind of don't want to give up on him. So if you have any ideas on what I can make this into, please comment them below.